is the Revisionary Podcast with your host, Juan Carlos. The Revisionary Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Revisionary Podcast. And as always, I am your host, Juan Carlos. First and foremost, I want to say welcome back to you Revisionaries to another episode. We did it! Yay! For those of you guys who are listening for the first time, the way this works is we bring on guests, usually comedians, who tell a nonfiction story about their lives in which they wish things had gone a little bit differently. Afterwards, I give them an opportunity to retell the same exact story, except this time they can change any facts or details that they'd like about the story. So it's pretty easy peasy. Before we jump into this, I actually have an announcement to make. I know we were supposed to have a live episode this weekend, but unfortunately, it's going to have to be rescheduled, but don't worry. We're only pushing it back 1 week, so still tune in. Make sure you download the Bullhorn app. This is still happening, so it'll happen now on April 17th at noon Eastern. Make sure you check it out because it is an exciting guest, and it is a former guest on the Revisionary Podcast, someone you guys all seem to have loved, so we're excited for them to come back. And again, make sure you're following us on social media so that you know exactly who it is. So, before we get started, today I'm really excited because we're actually going to be leaving the United States for a little bit again. I know we've done this before. We left and, we had a conversation in Mexico, so that was pretty cool. But now we're actually going all the way to Europe. And we'll be speaking to Kerim, who I met randomly through the internet. But since then, we've had productive conversations, and we have some talks of things we're going to collaborate with. So I'm really excited to get him on the podcast and just have a chat with him. He's a really fun guy, or at least he seems it. Again, I haven't met him in person, but he seems really cool. He makes me laugh. He makes a lot of American jokes, which I don't mind. I personally think a lot of them are kind of funny. My favorite was, well, you know what? Never mind. I won't break this up because that's his joke to tell, but he tells a great joke about the American consulate, which I really enjoy. So that's pretty cool that he's coming on here. And you know what? Why don't we just get right into it? And without further ado, let's get Kerim on the line.
Hello, Kerim. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. How about you?
Oh, man, I am doing phenomenal. I'm always excited to record another episode of the Revisionary Podcast.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
No, we do appreciate your time. And for those of you guys who are listening, he's actually located out in Europe right now. So he's really staying up late so he can be with us today.
Yeah, well, it's Friday and I'm this weekend, I'm free. So I don't mind staying up a little bit later just to be on a podcast.
I see. So we're partying tonight. That's what it is on a Friday night. A little partying, a little ice cream, and watching a Netflix movie.
Exactly. We call it fredagsfeeling.
Yes. So why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and where you're from and where you grew up.
Okay, so my name is Kerim Hrustanović. People struggle a lot with that last name. I'm 29 years old, and I was born in Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1991. And I came as a refugee to Sweden due to the war that broke out there in 1992. So I was a baby when I got to Sweden, and we were living in like this refugee camp up in northern Sweden where it was cold and very desolate. And I don't remember anything from that period. My brother was born up there, and we later moved to a town called Norrköping in southeastern Sweden. And I grew up in an area where a lot of immigrants live of different backgrounds from the Middle East, Africa, Eastern Europe, the Balkans, where I'm from. So I basically grew up in a segregated area. And
let me ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
We hear a lot about what it's like to be an immigrant here in the United States. Would you say that in your country, the immigrant experience is similar, or are they more accepting?
I would say there are some similarities when it comes to racism and discrimination. I would say that discrimination and racism is more aggressive in America, but I also think that depends on where in America you're living, since it's a very big country. And I think that it would differ as well in Sweden, depends on where you live and also where you come from. I would say that there are actually some immigrant groups here that are more popular than others, or that are more widely accepted by the Swedes or the ethnic Swedes or whatever you want to call them. But there's definitely a lot of segregation here.
What kind of groups are more widely accepted?
Well, it's actually Bosnians and Iranians. We're the most popular groups.
So you're group.
Yes, so we don't like to associate ourselves with the other immigrants. We're like, let's cut them out, Yeah.
You heard it here first. He thinks they're better than them. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. And Poles are very popular too. They do all the construction work here and plumbing, and they drive trucks. Yeah.
Okay. No, so that's pretty cool. So you're a comedian now, right?
Yes.
How'd you get started in comedy out in Sweden?
Well, I grew up as a fan of comedy. Even when I was a child, I enjoyed watching stand-up comedy, and I watched some Swedish stand-up comedians on TV. There were these stand-up shows and these comedy shows here. And I watched a lot of American stand-up, Eddie Murphy. That's actually how I learned English, by listening to American music and watching American stand-up. And we had English in school, but I'd say I learned more from reading books and watching or consuming American culture,
Hold on. When you say consuming American cultures, were you consuming like Friends, or are we talking about like, Living Color and that kind? Like, where were you getting your English from?
Living Color, Yo MTV Raps, Chappelle Show.
Oh my God. I'm loving it. So you grew up on BET is what you're telling me.
Arsenio, yeah.
That's wonderful. Look, I'm glad that American culture is that far-reaching. I think that's pretty cool. All right. So tell me a little bit more about yourself, because you speak multiple languages as well, right?
Yes.
How many languages do you speak?
7 or 8 or something like that, to a very...
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow. I had a friend who used to joke around. Because I always like, oh, wow, you speak a lot of language. You must be really smart. And my friend goes, no. I may speak more languages with you than you, but that just means that more people in this world can understand how much of an idiot I am. And I always thought that was interesting.
Yeah, he has a point. When it comes to Europe, in America, you don't need to learn a lot of languages because it's a big country and American culture and economy is dominating the world. Europe consists of a bunch of small countries where you're basically forced to learn the language if you want to do international business, if you want to travel. And, Bosnia has 4 million inhabitants. Sweden has 10 million inhabitants. You have to learn English if you want to succeed abroad, if you want to travel. And then there's also the fact that some European languages are very similar to each other. For example, Norwegian and Danish are mutually intelligible to Swedish. So if a Norwegian or Dane is speaking to me, I can understand everything what they're saying. Some words are different, the grammar is different. But if you just concentrate a little bit and you memorize some of the differences and the different words, it's really easy to understand. But, we don't really like each other neither. So a lot of Swedes will pretend that they don't understand Danish. But they don't.
That's funny.
Like, especially the Danes. We don't like the Danes.
Why?
Well, there's a lot of history behind that. The southern part of Sweden, which is called Scania, used to be Danish territory up until I believe the 17th century, when it was conquered by Sweden, and then it was reconquered by Denmark a few times, but it was permanently Swedish around the 1700s, and they basically forced the Danes there to learn to speak Swedish and to become Swedes, and they even forced them to change their last names, and they were extremely oppressed, and even to this day people from other parts of Sweden make fun of their accent, the people from South Sweden, from Scania, because they have this, the Danes, when they pronounce the letter R, they pronounce it like kind of like the Germans.
Okay.
And we make fun of that a lot. Yeah. And up until recently, you couldn't get a job in TV or radio if you had a Scanian accent in Sweden.
Wow. So that's super interesting. I didn't know it was like that, but with that being said, why don't we go ahead and get into this? The stage is yours. Please go ahead and tell us your story.
Okay, so this was back in, I don't know if it was 2007 or 2008 or something like that. I was 17 years old, teenager, going to high school, and I was super into my hip-hop phase too. I wore a bunch of, at that night I was wearing my Wu-Tang Clan baggy jeans. It had the Wu-Tang Clan logo, in the butt cheeks, like a golden Wu-Tang Clan logo.
Why?
It was really shiny.
Why?
I don't know. I think it was their official.
Why did you wear it? I want to know.
Because I like baggy jeans and I like the Wu-Tang Clan. And in Europe, people love to wear tight pants, and I was opposed to that. I was like, no,
look, I'm
going with the Americans on this one.
Wu-Tang ain't nothing to play with. I get it.
Yeah, and I had an Echo Unlimited, baseball jacket on.
Did you wear?
I was wearing like a. No.
Oh,
and
okay.
I believe I was wearing Adidas sneakers. I'm not sure, but I remember I wore a purple baseball cap, and then I was I was wearing a shamag, which is, have you seen that Palestinian scarf, the black and white checkered scarf they wear around their necks? I was covering my face with it, so you could only see my eyes because it was extremely cold. This was in December.
Okay.
Yes, and I was leaving my friend's place. And I was going to take a detour before walking home. So I was walking through the central part of my city, Norrköping, which it's called Norrköping, and it has around 130,000 inhabitants. So it's a pretty small town, And I'm walking through this park, and all of a sudden, a police car pulls up right next to me. And out comes two police officers, and one of them is a tall, blonde Swedish guy. He was like 6'7", 6'8", so like a stereotypical Swede. And the other guy was like a 5'7", 5'8", short black guy. So they looked like something out of a cartoon,
Okay.
And they came up to me and they were like, "Hi," and I was like, "Hi. What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I'm walking." They're like, "Why?" I'm like, "Because I use my feet to walk," And they're like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, "Well, I was at my friend's place." And they're like, "Where are you headed?" And I'm like, "I'm on my way home." "And where do you live?" And I said, "I live in this area." And they're like, "Why are you walking in this direction?"
Wait. Hold on.
Yeah.
Why did they stop you to begin with? I didn't understand.
Well, I'm going to get to that now.
Sorry.
So I was telling them I lived in a specific part of the city, and they're like, "But why are you taking this detour?" I'm like, "Well, because I feel like taking a walk." And they're like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Because I like walking." And then they were like, "So can we see your ID, please?" So I pulled out my ID, and they looked at my picture, at my social security number, and then one of them went to the police car, and they started like calling their headquarters and typing my social security number into the computer, the police computer. And the other cop, the short cop, he was inspecting me. So he took out a flashlight and he turned it on and he pointed the light straight into my eyes, So I was like blinking and feeling extremely.
Right.
I was scared, and I was 17 years old. I wasn't, and he was like pointing it towards my eyes and then my ears and up my nostrils too. And then the other cop came and he started to check, my pockets. He was like feeling my legs, from the bottom to the top. They checked my jacket, and he asked me to pull everything out. Everything that I had in my pocket, I had to pull it out. So I pulled out my keys, my phone, and they asked me, if I had done any drugs or if I had smoked any weed, and I said no, none. I haven't done none of those things. And they actually pulled out this. I don't know what it's called, but it's this equipment that you use to check if someone's drunk. You have to like blow into it.
Oh, a breathalyzer.
Yes, exactly. So I had to breathe into the breathalyzer, and they saw that I was sober. And I guess they could tell that I wasn't high. I don't know if you even have any equipment for that type of. Yeah, I guess you'd have to pee, but it was kind of weird if they asked me to pee in that park.
Right.
It was like freezing cold. So they went to the car and told me to wait. So I waited, and they were talking to someone over the police radio. I couldn't hear what they were saying. And they came back and they gave my stuff back. So they had taken my keys and my wallet and my ID and everything, and they gave it back to me. And they said, "You have a good night, sir." And I was like, "Okay, but hold up." And I actually said, like, "Did you guys stop me because of my origins, because of my foreign origins?" And that short black cop, he actually said, "What? No, you look like a suspect. You look exactly like him."
Mm-hmm.
And I was, and he said, "And by the way, I can't be racist, and because I'm an N-word, and I'm like, whoa, you know. Okay, and then after that, they just said, "Have a good night," and they left.
So, you think that they strictly stopped you because you're a Muslim? Is that what you were saying?
Probably, you know, because the shamag, that scarf, was kind of a giveaway, and this was, you know, during a time when there were a lot of conflicts, you know, in Lebanon and in Gaza, Palestine and Israel and all that stuff. You know, there were a lot of bombings, and you see this piece of cloth in you see this cloth in a lot of clips and videos at that time.
And you were by yourself when this happened?
Yes.
So now you mentioned you were scared, but what did you think was going to happen? Did you think you were going to jail? Walk me through your mindset during the waiting time.
I thought that I was probably going to get arrested and they were going to interrogate me. But in Sweden, they can't throw you into jail immediately. They can detain you for, I believe, 2 weeks or something like that if they really have a good reason. Yeah.
Wow.
So
okay.
they have like this tiny like prison, like an incarceration zone next to the police headquarters where they can keep you. Or maybe it's 24 hours. I'm not sure, but they can't like throw you into a proper jail, you know. And I thought they would interrogate me, put me in there, and then there'd be some type of that they'd try to get me, you know, thrown into prison. I probably wouldn't have gotten thrown into prison because I was a minor, and we don't really have such strict punishments here in Sweden, especially when you're a minor. So I thought I was going to jail and that they were going to frame me for some reason.
Wait, aren't you guys the country that arrested A$AP Rocky?
Yes.
And wasn't he in jail for like 2 months?
Yes.
And you just told me that they could have only held you for 2 weeks. That's not adding up.
Well, I think it's because they had, you know, they had a good reason to keep him in that jail because, you know, his fight was recorded and there were a lot of witnesses, you know. There was no proof on me, but they had proof on him.
Got it.
And by the way, it was kind of funny when Trump thought that we had this bail money system here in Sweden. He thought he would be able to pay A$AP Rocky's bail.
Oh, you don't have bail money?
No.
How does your system work then?
If their suspicions aren't strong enough, they'll let you go, and then you'll receive a letter when you're supposed to go to court. And then if you get your sentence, you're supposed to show up. Mm-hmm. So they trust you to show up.
So they treat you like adults. Got it.
Yes. but in extreme causes, you know, when there's some, you know, like extremely violent and dangerous criminals involved, they'll probably keep them locked up in these temporary prisons and then they send them to the court, and then they wait until the court's decision and all that. And by the way, we have 3 different types of courts. So we have a local court for our municipality, and then we have one higher court, and then one court which is like the royal court, which is for the entire country. So depending on the severity of the case, like you could like if you get sentenced to something in the first course, you can object to it, and they'll take it to the next level, or they make a decision if they'll take it to the next level. So yeah,
that sounds a little bit like our appeals process here in the U.S.
Yeah.
So okay. So what happens if you don't show up for your court hearing? Like, because, you know, with the bail process, you know, they send out a warrant and they can arrest you, but they also keep your money. You lose money.
Yeah. They can arrest you here if you don't show up.
Sure. But then what else?
I think they can lock you up for a period of time. I don't know how long they can lock you up for.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, outside of avoiding jail time, what other incentive is there for you to show up to court?
Well, there's no other incentive, but I guess most people don't want to go to jail.
Got it. Okay. I guess maybe only in the U.S. do they need to have financial incentive for you to show up for your court date.
Yes.
I guess that makes a lot of sense. Fair enough. Look, I don't know how these things work. I don't have any experience with, you know, the legal system because, you know, knock on wood, I've never been arrested. I haven't had to deal with the police in that manner.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I've only been interrogated, but never arrested. And, you know, the philosophy of like the Swedish prison system is that they want to treat inmates like humans. You know, they want to give them a humane time there. So actually these wardens and guards that walk around the prisons, they actually have conversations and they play card games with the prisoners and they hang out with them pretty much.
Right. So it's not that bad. Got it.
Yeah, you even have some prisons have internet and TVs and so it's very different.
So we're going to get back into your story for a second, but before we do that, out of curiosity, so in your prison systems, is the emphasis on rehabilitation and like educating prisoners so that they don't relapse?
Yes, you can actually go to college while you're in prison as well. So
and who
a lot
pays
of prisoners, it's the taxpayers, so it's free.
Got it.
Yeah, if they're Swedish citizens, they can study for free. So there's actually people who obtain degrees while they've been in prison.
And when you apply for a job, do they ask you about your criminal history?
They don't ask you. They actually have a right to. They ask you, they inform you that okay, we're gonna take your information here and we're gonna send it to the authorities, and then the authorities will send them a letter, which informs them about which gives them your criminal record. It depends on the job. It depends on what type of job it is. In some other jobs, they'll ask you to send a request to the police to send you an envelope which contains all of your criminal records. And if you don't have any records, it just shows like an empty piece of paper. And then you bring it. You're not allowed to open it, and you just show it to the interviewee and or the interviewer, and they open it and then they just check it. So they don't actually. You go through the authorities, so they don't ask you about it.
Got it. Okay. And you said that you were walking through a not too good part of town, right?
No, actually, kind of. It's like in the central part of the city or the town, but it was actually pretty close to a nightclub, and in nightclubs, a lot of shady people hang around.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
but I lived in the bad area of town, so it's.
Are you trying to tell me you lived in the hood?
Yes. Well, to Swedish, I still live in the hood actually, but it's to what when I say hood, I don't mean an American hood, but still to our standards, it's a hood, Right.
Yeah.
Where a lot of immigrants live. Yeah.
Okay. No, I 100% get that. So, who were you dealing with primarily, the taller guy or the shorter guy?
I was dealing with the shorter guy. He had that, typical Napoleon complex. He wanted to prove himself.
Got it.
Yeah, and I'm pretty tall myself. I'm like 6'2", 6'3". So he was looking up at me and I'm gonna show this dude what I'm all about. And he was pretty young at the time, so I believe that cops that have just finished their education, they really want to prove themselves. And our police training is much longer than yours, so I guess they're really keen on showing what they're capable of.
Got it. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense to me. So let's go right back into this and go ahead and retell me your story with your changes.
Okay. Well, I probably wouldn't have worn that scarf that way. I probably would have just rested around my neck, because that makes a huge difference, just not covering your face. I would have just been like, okay, it's cold, but it was like a Friday night. I don't want to get pulled over by the cops. I would have lowered the scarf so it wouldn't have been covering my face. But if I would have gotten pulled over by them, I would, I didn't have, there were no smartphones at the time, and I had a real shitty phone, but I would have picked up my phone and just started open a text message and start typing what they're telling me in some way, or just try to some way record what they were saying to me, or maybe call someone so that they can listen to, call a close friend or something and make them listen to the conversation or something like that, just to make sure that their actions were being recorded in some way, shape, or form, either by me taking notes of what they're saying or calling a friend, maybe asking him to record it if he could pick up the sound in some way. And I would also then tell them that, do you have any reason to check me? Or I wouldn't give them my ID. I would say, you only have you're only allowed to request my ID if I'm a suspect, if I'm a proper suspect, if I'm being suspect of a crime.
Yeah, but wasn't that the pretense under which they stopped you? Didn't they say that you fit the description?
Yes, but yes, if they would have said that, I would have said, what is the description? Is a baseball cap and whatever. It's
right.
I would say, why do I fit the description?
So it's interesting to hear you say that, because as a person of color here in the United States, if I was stopped, I don't know that I would even want to question the police, because I wouldn't want to put myself in a situation to make the process any longer than it has to be. So I think it's interesting that, you would have stood your ground and been a little bit more defiant.
Yes. These kind of things happen to people of color in Sweden as well. I don't think to the extent that it does to people in America. And obviously, I don't know what it's like to be a person of color in Sweden. Even though I'm an immigrant, they can tell I'm an immigrant. But I've heard people people of Middle Eastern or African descent have been discriminated by the police in one way or another. And there's been a lot of situations and cases of them behaving in a very improper way, or even beating people up. It's much more rare here, but it definitely does happen. And if it would have been a few years later, I would have definitely recorded it. And you're allowed to record them here. I don't know if you're allowed. I think you were allowed to record them in America as well.
I'm not too sure. I'm going to be honest with you. So hold on. Was there any fear at all about you getting beat or them like retaliating if you had stood your ground?
Yeah. So the fear was there, and the fear would have been there if I would have done it differently.
Okay.
Yeah.
So keep going. So you would have not given your ID, and then what would have happened?
Well, they would have had to give me a proper explanation and a proper reason for them to check my ID. So in the best scenario, they would have given up, and let me go. That's what I would have hoped for. But realistically, I believe that they would have just kept going. The Swedish cops also have this reputation of being lazy. So, instead of chasing the real criminals, they just, give a speeding ticket to someone or just pull someone over and waste some time,
Okay.
And yeah. And I was very skinny back then too.
So got it. So you weren't going to fight your way out of anything, right? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah. And the Swedish cops are not like Norwegian cops. Swedish cops, they wear guns. They have guns.
Right.
The Norwegian cops actually don't wear guns. They have the guns in the car.
So, I mean, I guess I'm trying to put myself in your situation, and even the thought makes me feel a little concerned, because especially if they have guns on them, I'm really not trying to antagonize the police at all. You know?
Yeah.
But so I first off, I respect your valor and the fact that you, in retrospect, what you really wanted to do was stand up for yourself, as you rightfully should.
Yes.
Okay. So now, so you get through it. You guys having a little back and forth. Ultimately, do you think you end up in cuffs?
I believe there's like a 70% chance I'd end up in cuffs, actually. Yeah. Okay.
So now they put you in cuffs. I'm assuming they bring you down to a holding station or something like that. You said they could hold you for up to 2 weeks, right?
Either it's 2 weeks or 24 hours. I'm not sure. It's one.
That's a large difference. You know what I mean?
I know. I'm not too well. I've been doing some research into the legal system, but I don't remember it properly.
I'm just saying, one of those is a business trip. The other one is a vacation. You know what I mean? Those are not the same thing.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I'll do my research for you.
No, you're perfectly fine. So they're holding you in this, let's say they take you in, they're holding you. What happens? Because you mentioned earlier that they had to have reasonable suspicion or a strong enough suspicion to hold you. Do you think they would have been able to hold you on anything?
I think they would. They would probably say that I fit the description, because I was actually dressed like a robber from some GTA game, with by covering my face with that piece of cloth and by wearing that baseball cap. So they probably would have been able to do that. and they probably would have interrogated me. They'd take me to an interrogation room, and then I wouldn't have talked. I would have demanded to get a lawyer. So I'd refuse to talk until I get a lawyer.
Now, are your legal fees covered, or are you just incurring debt at this point? Because you said you were 17, right?
Yes.
I mean, I assume at 17, I don't know how it works, right? I really don't. Like, I know here they can assign a public defender to you, but lawyers are generally expensive. Is that not the same in Sweden?
You can get a public defender here as well, and they're cheaper. You can get a private one too, and they're much more expensive. But I believe it's much more affordable to have a public defender in Sweden than what it is in America. So they can assign one to you, or you can pick one yourself.
Okay, so you would have gone the public defender route.
Yeah.
So this is not a criticism of the public defenders here in the United States at all, because I think that, they're unsung heroes of the court system, and quite honestly, they're overworked and underpaid. As a result, sometimes it seems like, from my understanding, is that because of how much they have on their plate, they're kind of, sometimes, it's a little more difficult for them than a private attorney who can focus solely on your case. So is it the same in Sweden, or would you have had good chances of your public defender winning it?
I think that I'd have a good chance of winning it in this case, actually. The Swedish authorities, when it comes to the migration agency, the police, different municipalities, they've actually been behaving in a very incompetent way. So I think I would have had a chance to win in this situation. I'd also involve the media. I'd write something about it on Facebook as well, and
right, because you would have gotten a chance to go home.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Since it would have been 24 hours, I'd go home and write, something and contact local media, national media.
Mm-hmm. And I think, see, here's the thing. I think that's such a huge, difference, because I guess the entire time you're speaking, I'm trying very hard to remove myself from the American perspective.
Yeah.
But it's hard for me to do so because I only know what I know. So I'm imagining, oh God, here you are, hopefully you get bail, but you could be, held up until you're held up, until, you have a court date or hearing. But no, it's a completely different system where you're basically at home. You're just working this out and letting your lawyers handle this for you.
Yes, exactly. So on that part is good. The problem with our justice system is that our punishments are way too soft, I believe,
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: you, in addition to mentioning the scarf that you were wearing covering your face, you also made it a point to mention the type of clothing that you were wearing. Is that type of clothing associated with criminal behavior in Sweden?
Yes. Hip hop is very popular here, especially now. Hip hop came to Sweden during the 90s, and it was almost immediately associated with, crime and working class people, poor people. And the first people who started doing hip hop and made it popular in Sweden were, immigrants, one of them being the Latin Kings, who are Latino rappers from Stockholm, from the suburbs of Stockholm. And when I say suburb, I don't mean a suburb in America where a lot of Karens live, but a suburb in Sweden. Our suburbs are basically areas that were built in the 60s and 70s, where they made affordable housing for the working class. When immigrants started coming here, they moved into these areas. So they're segregated areas where a lot of, poor immigrants live. So basically, a lot of immigrant rappers started making, music about life in the immigrant suburbs in the 90s. And it was very, it still is extremely associated to poor people, immigrants, crime, and there's also this perception of hip hop. People make a lot of associations to gangster rappers from America. So I was dressed as a stereotypical rapper, I suppose, and it still has, especially among the middle class, the upper middle class in Sweden. Hip hop and hip hop culture has a very negative connotation and association to these people, even though I believe it's the biggest genre in Sweden.
Okay. Wow. So it's interesting to see that these issues are not unique to the United States. Because I do think that for a long time, and I'm not sure if that perception has changed, but I do think that hip hop has become a little more mainstream here in the United States. And I do feel that for a long time it was associated with, again, like you said, the working class and, and crime. So I think it's interesting that that perception permeated throughout the world and not just locally here in the States. Would you have changed your outfit? Like you mentioned changing the scarf, but would you have changed your outfit at all?
Today, probably yes. At the time, I wouldn't have done it, but yes, I would have changed my outfit. And I don't dress the same way today. So I probably would have changed my outfit as well. Yes.
Okay. And now, do you think that the interaction would have gone a little differently if the taller police officer had taken the lead?
Yeah, because he was a bit older than the other guy, and he was like, he seemed to be a little bit more experienced. And I noticed this from people who are extremely tall, that they're usually pretty laid back, and they feel like they have nothing to prove, and because they know that they're all already intimidating just by being that big,
Right.
But I think that his colleague would have been like standing in the background and try to get him riled up or get me riled up. So
like, yeah, go, get him.
yeah, exactly.
No, okay.
So I think he would have handled it a little bit differently.
Got it. No, look, that makes a lot of sense. So now, how do you feel? Like, I mean, I know we kind of touched upon this a little bit, but how do you feel that your changes would have affected you today? How would your life be different today if your story had happened as you had changed it?
If I would have done that, along with some other decisions where I would have stood my ground, I would have felt that I have more, a bigger sense of self-worth. I'd be more confident, and I'd take care of myself better, and my life would have probably been more balanced, and I would have reached or accomplished some goals that I had a long time ago, much earlier, or maybe. Well, I'm still figuring out stuff that I want to do now when I'm 29. Maybe I would have figured out what I really want to do a bit earlier too. If I just if I spent time, taking care of myself and standing my ground, because that's something that I did a lot in the past. Is that I let people run over me, and I avoided conflicts, which is extremely Swedish, by the way. Swedes don't like being confrontational.
Right.
So I think that I would have been a more, mentally fit person, if that's the correct term. But yeah.
Okay. No, look, I get it, and I appreciate you coming on here today and sharing your story with us. Just a few more things before I let you go. We have a tradition on this podcast where at the end of every episode, we like to encourage our listeners to go out and show support for an organization or charity. Do you have one in mind that is near and dear to your heart?
Yes, there's an organization in Stockholm, the capital of Sweden, called Vid din sida, which means by your side. And they help homeless people in Stockholm. It's mostly older, retired homeless people who don't have a home or who can't pay their rent. They actually have like this basement that they rent where they can go and rest their feet, and where they can eat, where they can spend a day or two. So they help very vulnerable people, elders, who are living in the big city in Stockholm, and they have a page on Facebook and on Instagram as well, I believe. So if you're living in Sweden, I'd recommend you can donate some money to them and help them with this cause. And now they're running like public soup kitchens in central Stockholm where homeless people can come and eat. So people associate Sweden with being a very modern country where there's no poverty, but the truth is we have a lot of poverty, and it's growing. And where our politicians fail us, organizations like these do not. And instead of complaining, you can do something to contribute.
Wow. No, thank you. I had no idea. I guess because, I don't necessarily follow Sweden as closely as I do American stuff. I kind of just always assume that your government just took care of everybody. So it's good to know that, that that's not necessarily the case. Well, not that that's good, but you know what I mean? Like, it's good to know that there are organizations out there trying to make a difference in the lives of the common citizen on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, and it's actually heartwarming to see that they're able to do this solely by the donations of the Swedish people. So it gives me hope.
So, Revisionaries, as always, I'm going to include that in the description below. I'll include a link, so if you want to go ahead and support them in any way, shape, or form, feel free to do so, and let's help with the homelessness issue. Also, before I let you go, the last question that I have for all my guests is I like to ask them to share with us a quick story about their childhood that, brings a smile to their face or, just gives them that warm feelings, just like a happy moment that you always think of from your childhood.
It's kind of hard to come up with something just like that, but I just remember coming back to Bosnia for the first time when I was 8 or 9 years old to the town where I was born, and there was a bridge there, an old bridge made out of stone which was blown up during the war, which was an important symbol for the city. And they had built a bridge made out of wood there, and there were a lot of people coming back. This was in '98 or '99, and I just remember this feeling, of hope, of restoration. Seeing people returning to the city, both as tourists, or coming back as refugees from other countries, and just having the local food there and sitting there with my family. It was seeing the lush green mountains, the emerald green river flowing through the city, eating mincemeat with garlic and eating ice cream there under the hot summer sun. It was my first time. It's my first memory from Bosnia, and it's something that I'll always cherish.
Do you get to go back to Bosnia often?
We went every year when I was a kid, and then I kind of grew tired of it for a period. The last time I was there was 2 years ago, but we were actually supposed to go this summer, me and my wife, but due to COVID, we couldn't go.
Right.
But we're planning to go as soon as possible.
Okay. No, that's a beautiful memory. Thank you for coming on the Revisionary podcast. Where can the Revisionaries follow you?
Well, where I post my English language content on TikTok. So follow me on TikTok on Kerim the Bosnian, everything, all those words put together.
All right, fair enough. And do you have any last words for our Revisionaries before I let you go?
Well, I would say that, in these times, the entire world is going through a lot of trials and tribulations, and just do what you can from your part, some deeds and actions, whether small or big, to show that we can show solidarity with each other. Try to do something unselfish every day, and then you'll see how things around you change for the better. Well,
that's a beautiful sentiment. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Likewise.
The Revisionary Podcast.
So this was actually an interesting story for me because he experienced something that we see often in the media here in the United States, but it's interesting to watch him experience it from a different perspective, right? Like, it wasn't the same narrative that we see here in the United States, so that was pretty cool, just to see it from the other side of the coin. If you guys enjoyed this, please make sure you're following us on Instagram at Revisionary Podcast and Facebook. www.facebook.com/Revisionary Podcast. Make sure you download the Bullhorn app, and make sure you tune in on April 17th. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited for it. And it's an opportunity to call in live. If you guys are listening to these stories anyway, you might as well just call in and participate, be an active participant in this story. So I want to say thank you to all of you again, and have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening.
This is